Welcome back to She Asked, Tools for Practical Hope. On this podcast, we ask life's deeper questions, not because we have all the answers, but because I believe asking better questions changes the way we live. I'm your host, Anna McBride, and today I'm going to tell you about a wedding. Well, sort of, because this isn't really a story about a wedding. It's a story about legacy. It's a story about grief. It's a story about family. My family. And it's about one question that changed me forever. But before we begin, I want to let you know that I've also written about this story in a recent Substack essay called The Weddings That Change Us. There are more details and more reflections and deeper insights than I will have time to cover today. So after listening to this podcast, I hope that you will go over to Substack and read the essay. There's going to be a link for it in the show notes. So let's begin. A few weeks ago, I attended my nephew Chase's wedding at the Wolf Family Vineyard in St. Helena, California, in Napa Valley. If you've ever been to Napa in August, you know it's hot and dry. The kind of dry that reminds you how precious water is. Yet, as I walked through the vineyard, I couldn't stop thinking how incredibly alive everything was. The hydrangeas, the crepe myrtles, the climbing clematis, the roses, even the hibiscus. Every plant seemed to be thriving. Everything was placed with intention. The gardens, the tables, the ceremony, even the vineyard itself belonged to longtime friends of Chase's wife, Emma's family, her parents, making the whole event feel beautifully interconnected. Standing there on August 8th, a date that I've totally associated with the Lionsgate portal because I am a numerology nerd, yes, I found myself thinking about infinity. Not abundance, not success, love. Because while I stood amongst all of these thriving plants, I couldn't stop thinking about death. My sister Margaret should have been there. Margaret is Chase's mother and my sister who passed away this past December. And if you've asked anyone who knew her to describe her, you'd hear the same words repeated over and over. Kind, selfless, loving, thoughtful. She made people feel seen. And I realized something over the weekend. We spend so much of our lives worrying what people will remember about us, our careers, our accomplishments, our mistakes, our titles. But no one talked about Margaret's resume. They talked about how she made them feel. Maybe that's our real legacy. Can I confess something? I realized I was carrying a story that wasn't true. Because of my complicated relationship with Chase's father, my sister's husband, I unconsciously assumed Chase was exactly like him. I never questioned that assumption. How often we create stories about people without realizing we're the author. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Friend after friend stood up describing Chase. Generous, thoughtful, someone who remembers the little things, someone who shows up, someone who deeply loves the people in his life. And suddenly, I realized they weren't describing his father. They were describing Margaret. Her love didn't die when she died. It simply continued through her son. That realization humbled me. It also reminded me how dangerous assumptions can be. How often we miss the goodness in someone because we're looking at them through the lens of an old story. We rarely see people as they really are. We see them through the stories we've written about them, the narratives we carry about them. Sometimes these stories are protection, sometimes they limit us, and sometimes they simply are old. Through the weekend, I carried a camera. Not because I wanted more wedding photos. I wanted stories. I wanted to interview my siblings, my nephews, my extended family. And to all of them, I asked the same question. How has losing Margaret changed you? Almost everyone cried. But one after one, they told me that they had become more patient, kinder, gentler, intentional. Not because grief demanded it, but because Margaret inspired it. Then Russell, her younger son, told me what he believes were the last words Margaret said. She squeezed his hand and she whispered, "Be strong." When he told me that, he cried. And as I hugged him, I shared with him, you don't always have to be the strong one. Maybe that's the lesson we all need to hear. Because I grew up in a family that really favored strength. That taught, we were all taught to be strong for everyone else. And we forget what strength really is. Strength isn't pretending that we're okay. Strength is allowing ourselves to be held, to be helped, to be supported, to be loved. When the wedding was over and I went home to where I was staying, as I lied in bed, I realized that the biggest transformation hadn't happened inside my family. It had happened inside of me. I realized that for decades, as a therapist, I studied trauma, recovery, divorce, family systems, healing. It was part of my work, right? It was part of my calling, actually. I realized something uncomfortable, though, and that is that I had become very skilled at looking for the wounds, recognizing the wounds. I had unknowingly, however, taught my brain to look for what's broken first. Does that sound familiar? Our brains are designed to look for what's negative. Psychologists call it negativity bias. Our nervous systems naturally notices threats more quickly than beauty because evolutionarily that helped us survive. But surviving isn't the same thing as living. Healing asks us to retrain our brain, to practice seeing possibility, to expect love as often as we expect disconnection. That weekend reminded me that healing isn't just recovering from pain, it's recovering our capacity for awe. So I want to share with you some practices that I have been carrying since that weekend. Not because they're complicated, but because they're practical and they filled me with hope, with awe. Right? Everyone is asking me, so when I tell them about that weekend, they'll say things like, "Oh, that sounds so beautiful, but how do I actually change? Well, I'm going to give you these 3 tools as a way to help you towards that. First one, go looking for life. So sometime this week, take a walk without your headphones, no phone, no podcast, right? Simply notice what is alive. Maybe it's the flowers growing through the cracks of the sidewalk. Maybe it's children laughing. Maybe it's birds chirping. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe you can ask yourself, where is life trying to remind me that growth is still possible? Nature is one of our greatest teachers. It never rushes. It never compares. It simply keeps becoming. Maybe we can do that too. Here's a second tool. Rewrite a story. Just one. Ask yourself, what story have I outgrown? Mine was believing I knew who Chase was. It wasn't true. Maybe your story sounds like, I'm too old. I've always chose the wrong partner. I'm not creative. I'll never heal. Who would you become if you stopped believing that story? Who would you become if you stopped believing that story? Not because you're pretending, but because you've grown beyond it. One of the greatest acts of healing is allowing yourself to rewrite the narrative. And here's the third thing I want to offer you to take on this week. Become someone's legacy today, right? Don't wait until your funeral to wonder how people are going to remember you. How do you want to be remembered, right? Ask yourself that today. How do I want one person to feel after spending time with me today? More hopeful, safer, encouraged, seen? That's legacy. It's not built at the end of life. It's built on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. So this weekend did remind me, that wedding weekend reminded me to look longer, observe more, to really stop assuming I know and remember everything, right? So I want to ask you a question that I want to leave with you to consider today. Who has changed your life simply by the way they love you? Who has changed your life that way? Not because they were perfect, but because they showed you another way to be human. That's who my sister Margaret was. She showed me, showed us all another way to be human. So maybe today, when you realize who that person is for you, you tell them. Take them out for a walk. Get them a cup of coffee. Call them on the phone. Write them a letter. Something that expresses how they make you feel. Because they say that at the end of our life, people are going to remember more about how you made them feel than they will about your titles or what you did in your life or anything you ever said. It's how you make them feel. So tell this person, show this person how they made you feel, how they changed your life because they loved you. And I really do think that love is the legacy that we leave behind if we let ourselves. And love doesn't end when we die, right? It continues. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to continue it with me. My companion Substack essay, The Weddings That Change Us, goes much deeper into the insights and reflections. So please go read it on Substack. Again, the link to it will be in this show notes. And if you're in a season of grief, of divorce, recovery, or simply becoming the next version of you, know that you don't have to walk through it alone. Coaching has become one of the greatest privileges of my life because I get to witness people rediscover hope, purpose, and their own capacity for love again. If you'd like to explore working with me, I offer a complimentary consultation. You can schedule a time for it by going to my website, annamcbride.com. And if this episode touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you subscribed, you shared it with someone that you love, and join me by reading my weekly Substack essays. You can subscribe to them over at Substack. And also follow us on social media. This is how we keep the conversation flowing all week long. Thank you for spending time with me today. And until next time, keep asking, keep healing, keep becoming. And may you always leave more love behind than you have found. See you all soon on the next episode of She Asked. And until soon, be well.